Chicago suburb of Aurora, Illinois. Authorities say the suspect has been apprehended or neutralized, in their words. We're awaiting a news conference there. Senior correspondent Mike Tobin is live tonight in Aurora. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Brett. And a spokesman for the Kane County Coroner's Office says that one person has been killed throughout this incident. We heard from the spokesman for the city of Aurora, Clayton Muhammad. He says that the shooter in this case has been neutralized. There are numerous reports out there that say the word neutralized means that the shooter indeed has been killed. We know that 4 police officers were injured throughout the course of this. We don't know the extent of their injuries. We have been told that those injuries are not life-threatening. An unknown number of civilians were injured in this shooting. They have been taken to Mercy Medical Center and the Rush Copley Medical Center. We know that the Rush Copley Medical Center has taken in 2 individuals, their injuries said to be not life-threatening. What we have, really through local media who interviewed witnesses from the scene, is information that the shooter is someone who worked at this Henry Platt facility, and he worked in assembly. What set him off, that is unknown. We are waiting for the first briefing from the Aurora City Police Chief, Christian Zeman. That briefing has been delayed by a half hour, and that's because the newly elected governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, he wanted to be part of it, and it simply just takes a long time to get here from the city of Chicago. Brett.
All right, Mike, when that news conference happens, we will bring it to you live here on Fox. Thank you. Meantime, President Trump says he is declaring a national emergency to build a border wall because of what he calls an invasion from the south. The president made that declaration official this morning. The president conceding he will be sued, but is predicting success eventually. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has the story tonight from the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. White House officials tell Fox News that attorneys spent weeks going through all of the ins and outs of an emergency declaration to make sure that the president would be on solid ground today. Still, he stirred up a hornet's nest. With a stroke of his executive pen, President Trump today invited what may be the biggest challenge to his executive power yet.
We're talking about an invasion of our country with drugs, with human traffickers, with all types of criminals and gangs.
In total, President Trump is looking at $8 billion to build his border wall, $1.37 billion from the DHS appropriation, $601 million from the Treasury Department's forfeiture fund, $2.5 billion from the Pentagon's drug interdiction program, including $2.2 billion that will be reprogrammed from other areas of the Pentagon, and $3.6 billion from the military construction budget. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi ripped the president for raiding the Pentagon budget to build a wall, in a joint statement saying the president's unlawful declaration over a crisis that does not exist does great violence to our Constitution and makes America less safe, stealing from urgently needed defense funds for the security of our military and our nation. The president today insisted moving the money would not hurt the military.
We had certain funds that are being used at the discretion of generals, at the discretion of the military. Some of them haven't been allocated yet, and some of the generals think that this is more important.
In making his case, President Trump today pointed to dozens of emergency declarations that never drew the type of fire he's receiving. But those declarations weren't used as a way to go around Congress on appropriations. The president also gave his critics more ammunition today when he seemed to indicate the emergency declaration wasn't necessary.
I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster. And I don't have to do it for the election. I've already done a lot of wall.
Socialist firebrand Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said she'd introduce legislation to block the president, tweeting, "Joaquin Castro, Texas, and I aren't going to let the president declare a fake national emergency without a fight." A congressional fight may be the least of the president's worries. White House officials, even the president, openly acknowledge their attempt to reprogram military money will land them in court.
They will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there. And we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court.
The words had barely escaped the president's lips when the ACLU announced that it would sue the president. And Democrats on the House Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee, today sent a letter to the White House saying that they wanted to investigate the president's emergency declaration and asked the White House to make officials from both here and the Department of Justice available for the hearings. Brett?
More on this with the panel. John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. As we told you earlier, the president says the situation on the southern border is an invasion. His critics say it's a made-up emergency. Tonight, correspondent Casey Stiegel shows us what's happening at one major crossing, and you can decide for yourself.
Here in Eagle Pass, Texas, U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials face the arduous task of processing each caravan migrant, which involves feeding them and then conducting a credible fear interview to see if they qualify for asylum in the U.S. If they do, they're sent to a U.S. detention facility to formally begin the process in immigration court.
At this point, the system is at a total capacity at all points in the process. The status quo is not sustainable.
Which is why it could take weeks, if not months, to get through everyone. The long wait and cramped conditions caused tensions to boil over this week at the warehouse-turned-shelter in Piedras Negras, Mexico. U.S. officials worry the more desperate these migrants become, the more likely they are to become violent or even attempt to rush the border. So added security has been put in place to stop any threat.
You can see all of this concertina wire back here. What you have is rebar that's actually stuck in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 concrete barriers with the concertina wire on it, and what happens is these can be placed in a row, effectively creating a fence sealing off the international border here.
Some of the immigrants take matters into their own hands, wading into the Rio Grande River with small children in tow. Agents carried out 3 different rescues on Thursday, including this baby who agents saved from the chilly water. But this is a grim reminder of how others aren't so lucky.
I can honestly tell you that this is not the first one. We've been doing body recoveries for quite a while.
Border Patrol says so far, none of the people rescued have been members of the caravan, though officials admit that information is hard to verify. At the Texas-Mexico border, Casey Stiegel, Fox News.
A big day for the Dow, a 444-point gain today. The S&P 500 finished ahead 30. The Nasdaq was up 45. For the week, the Dow was up 3 1/3 percentage points. The S&P 500 gained 2.6. The Nasdaq finished ahead almost 3. Now, one of the reasons experts saw for today's market surge was China. President Trump says whatever trade deal he makes with that country will be second-guessed by his critics, so he has an unusual plan to address that. Tonight, correspondent Kevin Cork takes a look at how the negotiations are progressing and what the future may hold.
There is a possibility that I will extend the date. And if I do that, if I see that we're close to a deal or the deal is going in the right direction, I would do that at the same tariffs that we're charging now.
From Washington to Beijing, all the way to the corner of Wall and Broad, the president's announcement today that he might delay increasing tariffs on Chinese goods if ongoing trade talks continue to progress was met with great optimism, a reflection perhaps of both the pace of the talks and the size of the deal.
I guess you could say it's must be the biggest deal ever made if you think trade with China. How big does that get?
But time is running out. The president's threatened to raise tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods if a deal can't be struck by March 1st. That's on top of the more than $250 billion in tariffs already imposed.
We're going to be leveling the playing field. The tariffs are hurting China very badly. Right now, China is paying us billions of dollars a year in tariffs, and I haven't even started.
But trade talks have started, and they've led to progress between the two parties, according to the White House, something China's president hopes will continue.
I think that so far, the trade teams from both countries are working towards this road of consensus.
But among experts, there's still a healthy amount of skepticism when it comes to dealing with Beijing.
The real issue here is whether you can craft an arrangement that stops the Chinese from stealing hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. intellectual property each year. Whether you can craft an arrangement that stops them from other predatory trade practices, that's pretty unlikely.
The president, Bret, also said he would welcome input from a pretty unlikely source, offering to welcome Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi in toward the end of any negotiations to share their thoughts on a possible deal. Bret?
Kevin Cork of the White House briefing room. Kevin, thanks. A former top FBI official seems to be changing his story regarding an attempt to remove President Trump from office. The lawyer for fired Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, says statements about an effort to invoke the 25th Amendment are being taken out of context and misrepresented. He says McCabe was present when the subject was brought up by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, but McCabe did not participate in, quote, extended discussions about it. Also tonight, a federal judge has issued a partial gag order in the criminal case of longtime Trump confidant Roger Stone. He's charged with lying to Congress, obstruction, and witness tampering related to material stolen from the Hillary Clinton campaign. Stone has pleaded not guilty. The U.S. Supreme Court will decide whether the 2020 census can include a question about citizenship that could affect the allocation of seats in the House of Representatives and the distribution of billions of dollars in federal money. The justices have agreed to a speedy review of a lower court ruling that has so far blocked the administration from adding the citizenship question to the census for the first time since 1950. Police in Chicago say 2 men have been arrested in the investigation into an alleged assault on an actor. Jesse Smollett of the Fox TV show Empire says he was beaten by men shouting racial and homophobic slurs, one of whom said, quote, "This is MAGA country," referring to the president's Make America Great slogan. Great Again slogan. Police say the suspects, who are also black, were arrested for probable cause of committing the assault, but had not been charged as of this afternoon. One of them, according to police, worked on the set of Empire, and sources say they were friends of Smollett. That is all adding up to the growing suspicions by some in Chicago that Smollett may have fabricated the story. The U.S. is ratcheting up the economic and political pressure on Venezuela, with new sanctions announced today targeting 5 individuals from the Maduro regime. As that country hangs on the brink of civil war, National Security Advisor John Bolton speaks to correspondent Jillian Turner about the Trump team's game plan to oust Nicolas Maduro.
There's a lot at stake here. We're supporting this popular movement in Venezuela.
In an exclusive interview with Fox News, President Trump's national security advisor John Bolton says time's up for disputed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro.
I can tell you, among the key generals, the leading figures supporting Maduro, they're in constant conversation with the opposition. The press doesn't see this. It's not on the surface, but they're negotiating.
Clinging to power in Caracas, Maduro is firing warning shots at the Trump administration.
The infected hand of Donald Trump is hurting Venezuela. Hands off of Venezuela, Donald Trump, and Venezuela will flourish.
As millions of Venezuelans stare down the mouth of civil war and a mass-scale humanitarian crisis, Maduro insists it's President Trump's advisors who are the problem.
Imagine John Bolton, Elliot Abrams, the group of extremists that surround him has put him through a dead end.
But Bolton isn't blinking.
Well, it's just another to add to my honor roll of criticisms from authoritarian figures around the world. I welcome it.
It's been more than 3 weeks since opposition leader Juan Guaido claimed the presidency, and yet the country's military remains firmly behind Maduro.
Venezuela has 2,000 generals. That is more than all the generals in every NATO country combined. So that tells you where the corruption is.
Sources tell Fox News President Trump has stopped shy of ordering the Pentagon to draw up military plans, but the prospect of unilateral military intervention remains high. Bolton says it's a top priority for President Trump.
We talk about it several times a day. He's very interested in this.
The Pentagon confirms U.S. military planes are delivering humanitarian aid to the Colombian border. On Monday, President Trump set to address Venezuelan Americans in Miami. He'll make the case that socialism ultimately drives nations into the ground. Bret?
Jillian, thank you. Up next, the top man at the Pentagon is calling for more international help in the fight against ISIS, especially in Syria. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 11 in Los Angeles has a weather system known as an atmospheric river unleashes heavy rain across California, bringing the threat of mudslides and flooding to a region that has seen days of rain and heavy snow. Floodwaters are raising concerns about structural damage in one community southeast of L.A. Classes in many San Diego County school districts were canceled because of flooding, power outages, and road closures. Fox 28 in Columbus, Ohio, as Planned Parenthood sues the state of Ohio over a law that bans dilation and evacuation abortions, one of the most common abortion methods. Former Governor John Kasich signed a bill last year on the procedure known as DD&E. It is commonly used in second trimester abortions. Similar laws have been rejected by the courts. And this is a live look at Philadelphia from our affiliate Fox 29. One of the big stories there tonight, Pennsylvania's governor says the state's medical marijuana program has helped 83,000 patients cope with various conditions and illnesses in its first year. Approximately 1,000 physicians are now approved to allow patients to access the drug, and more than 14,000 doctors have registered to be a part of that program. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. The compensation fund for victims of the 9/11 attacks is running out of money and will cut future payments by 50 to 70%. Nearly 40,000 people have applied to the federal fund for those with illnesses potentially related to being at the site of 9/11. Nearly $5 billion in benefits have been awarded out of the $7.3 billion fund. Officials say any pending claims will be paid out at 50% of their prior value. Valid claims received after February 1st will be paid at just 30%. The fund is scheduled to stop taking claims in December of next year. The president's acting defense secretary says he foresees growth in the international coalition that is fighting ISIS terrorists in Iraq and Syria. The statement from Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan comes as U.S.-backed forces are trying to eradicate ISIS from its last stronghold inside Syria. Correspondent Benjamin Hall tells us how that's going.
Pounded by U.S. warplanes, the caliphate is crumbling, down to just a final sliver of land. President Trump says it will soon be over.
And that'll be announced over the next 24 hours.
ISIS have been making a final stand, though, using suicide car bombs, snipers, and these anti-tank guided missiles, shown here in ISIS propaganda. U.S. support remains critical to the end. In the last 2.5 weeks alone, the coalition has conducted 179 strikes in Syria, but most eyes are already on the future and the U.S. withdrawal. In Munich, Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan tried to reassure allies.
We will maintain our counterterrorism capabilities in the region, and we will continue to support our local partners' ability to stand up to the remnants of ISIS.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham went further today, suggesting some U.S. troops could stay in Syria alongside an increased European presence.
General Dunford will be coming to some of you in this room, our chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and will be asking for a contribution of forces to stabilize the region post-destruction of the caliphate.
Others are preparing too. In Sochi, the leaders of Russia, Turkey and Iran met to discuss the U.S. withdrawal. Iran and Russia say the Syrian government should move in. Turkey said it would.
It is imperative that the withdrawal process is conducted in a way that does not lead to a power vacuum.
Today, General Votel, head of U.S. forces in the Middle East, warned that local forces were not yet able to operate against ISIS without U.S. support, and that he would not recommend a withdrawal. Brett?
Benjamin Hall in London. Benjamin, thanks. Up next, will New York Democrats turn on their Democratic socialist darling over billions in lost investment from Amazon? We'll have that story. First, beyond our borders tonight, Vice President Mike Pence visited the memorial site at Auschwitz today. Pence and presidential advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner saw a train car, crematoriums, and the hair of victims at the Nazi concentration camp in Poland. Vice President Pence is on a 4-day visit to Europe that included meeting with Polish soldiers and American troops in Poland and a conference on the Middle East. Spain's prime minister is calling for an early election, general election for April. It's expected to highlight the deep political divisions coursing through that European Union nation. Spaniards will be going to the polls for the third time in less than 4 years after the minority socialist government lost a budget vote in parliament. Dozens of protesters held a demonstration today in support of a Philippine journalist who has aggressively covered President Rodrigo Duterte's administration. Federal agents served a warrant against Maria Ressa late Wednesday afternoon and escorted her from her office. Government critics are denouncing the move as a threat to media freedom. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back.
President Trump's critics in the press now taking on a new role. Media Weight Watchers, members of the media actually fat-shaming the president after his annual physical results were released. Take a look.
Listen, I don't care if he weighs close to 300 pounds.
President Trump claimed that migrants hoping to illegally enter the country through the southern border would, quote, have to be in extremely good shape to get over his proposed border wall. And that makes sense. He's in terrible shape, and he can't seem to get over it.
He has a terrible diet. To think that you're going to have his kind of vitals on that kind of diet is really fantasy thinking. I know a guy who's 6'4", and weighs and weighs close to 240 pounds. Yep. He does not look like that.
No.
And, you know,
no. But it's amazing they're even lying about. He's lying about his health.
Well, he's lying about his health.
I'm sure she.
When I saw this stat, Greg, the first moment I saw it said the left will not be able to resist. Apparently, 243 pounds is close to 300.
Yes, yeah. It's amazing.
Did they go to my school?
They can't do math economically, but when it comes to your weight, I think that they should put scales in front of the morning show studio, in front of the White House press room, and then you should have, when you get in, before you get on there, you have to get on the scale and they have to announce your weight. I wonder how Mika would feel about that. Yeah. Because you know what? You can't talk about weight if it's women, because that's called fat shaming. But if it's a dude, go right ahead. It's another example of reverse sexism, and you'll see that in my new book, Reverse Sexism, coming out in June. I'm joking, but you know what? I'm kind of for talking about weight, because when I was on Red Eye, I put on a lot of weight, and you know how I lost weight?
Oh, I remember that.
I lost weight because everybody on Twitter was making fun of how fat I was.
Oh. Is that true?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was incentive.
Dana?
I would rather release my tax returns than my weight.
Those are heavier.
Why?
That's silly because you look
fantastic.
No, I'm just telling you that Greg is right. Women do not want to talk about their weight. And so President Harris or Gillibrand or whoever, Gillibrand?
Yeah, it's Gillibrand.
Whoever it's going to be in the future, there will be a woman president.
Who's the lady in white? Gabbard?
Tulsi Gabbard?
Yes. Say her. President Gabbard. That's
Gabbard.
easier.
Yeah, okay, that's for the future. No, seriously. Honestly, women are not going to want to do it, and I bet they'll be the first ones to say, I'm not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Just like he said, I'm not releasing my tax returns.
One, and Obama was famous.
That was pretty good. I don't think that works, but that was pretty
good.
No,
Obama was famously a fitness
Yeah.
fanatic. Trump takes a different approach. Does that matter for the presidency?
Well, I think what people are picking up on here is much bigger, which is that you'll recall that when he was running for president, he had that unusual doctor here in New York who, it turns out, didn't even proclaim that he was in great shape. Turned out that Trump had written his own description of his health and then had it released to the press or leaked to the press so that he would be the most healthiest, greatest shape. And then last year, it was Ronnie Jackson who said he's in the greatest shape and then was later nominated for VA secretary but didn't make it.
But the reason you do this is to see if the president is going to be healthy enough to be able to take care of the country.
Yes, and that's the
making
point.
fun of his weight is not newsy.
I think that what people are saying is you can't trust that he's telling you whether or not he's in good shape or bad shape. People said, the one that caught my eyes was people said, hey, you know that guy who's, I think, a linebacker for the Chicago Bears? He's 6'3", 240 AK-47. Boy, he doesn't look like that.
That's great journalism.
You have me thinking, though, about, because there are a lot of women that are going to be running for president. How are they going to cover women? Because they're not going to want to talk about weight, their physical appearance.
You got to ask how much they weigh if they're doing the physical. Because we're equal.
Yeah, but
men and women are equal.
Look what they do to Melania, though. I mean, they criticize her.
But she's not president.
Right. So I'm saying, though, I wonder if it's just women on the left you can't criticize, but if when a Sarah Palin was on that ticket, she got criticized left and right.
But to the point. You forget what they said about Michelle Obama. She could lose some weight. Her arms are too big.
She was adored.
Who was saying that? Nobody here. Not here.
Come on.
You're going to regret when President Trump lives to be 120 years old.
Why is that?
They were wrong. They were right. You were wrong.
That what? That McDonald's hamburgers will make you live forever?
They do. I'll say this, in the military, every time they do a height and weight index, I was deemed to be overweight. All of those indexes are ridiculous.
I agree.
I don't know who they're for.
Yeah, I agree.
But we got to move. Sorry. All right. A man fends off an attack from a mountain lion with his bare hands. That up next in the Fastest 7.
Welcome back. It is time for the Fastest 7.
Speed it up. Come on.
First up, shocking video showing the moment a 19-year-old Instagram influencer hurled a chair off the 45th floor of a Toronto high-rise building, crashing into traffic below. Thankfully, no one was injured. The woman is now facing multiple charges, including mischief and endangering life. Greg?
I watched this, and my blood boils, and we're doing it on my show tomorrow. It gets me so mad. It's how can luck weigh on your punishment? If the chair had killed people, it would change the sentence, right? But nobody got hurt. So she will probably get off with a slap on the wrist.
Yep.
That ticks me off.
Dana, what do you think?
Well, yes, and I also think Instagram, they should have shut it down, right? Like they should call, Instagram should call the cops on her.
Pete, $2,000 bail on this? That doesn't seem like enough.
No, probably not. But it also strikes me as the type of foolish thing I may have done when I was 19.
No way.
No.
Listen, Pete, don't say that.
I didn't do that, and I didn't have Instagram. But when you're 19, you're foolish. You have friends.
You would not have done.
I hear you. They should throw the chair at her.
You served your country. You care about the human condition. You wouldn't have done that.
This was before I served my country.
No, it's in your heart.
I would. I don't, because my heart would not have wanted. She doesn't want to hurt anybody.
I know what you're saying. You're saying her brain isn't fully formed because she's a teenager.
Foolishness lives in the hearts of kids.
Dana, you don't have to defend Pete. He's a good man. His name's not Donald Trump. You don't have to defend him.
What?
What do you mean? I tell you what I think. This is so interesting that, in fact, what the police said, this was the highest reported case on social media ever. So it was the social media
that got her.
Yeah, but I can't believe that she's only charged with mischief, endangering life, mischief, damaging property, and common nuisance. They got to send a signal to the rest of the people that you can't do this.
Should she get the chair?
I think you do a lot of stuff. You do a lot of dumb stuff at 19, but if it was on a highway, I mean, highways.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. All right, we got another one. This one is crazy. A man says he survived a mountain lion attack by killing it with his bare hands. Travis Kaufman was out for a run last week when he came face to face with the fierce feline.
There was a point where I was concerned that I wasn't going to make it out of it. I knew with two pretty good blows to the back of the head that it didn't release, that I was probably going to have to do something a little more drastic, and I was able to kind of shift my weight and get a foot on its neck.
All right, I definitely would not have survived. I would have been like, oh, come here, my baby, yes, mountain lion. But you, of all the people I know, this would have been you.
Well, I've rehearsed it in my brain. Yeah. Like, what would I do in that moment? You let him get a little clamp right here. You're going to take it in the arm. And
then he dies because you haven't washed your hands in 20 years.
Well, that too, because I give him the germs that are all over my body.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the approach. That's part of why I do it.
Then he's
good on this guy. You're ready to go. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, and
someone else take it.
And he didn't run, which they say, a wildlife expert was like, if you run, it activates their predatorial instinct.
Jedediah, this is why I don't hike without my own mountain lion. I have a permit to leash, believe it or not. I think I have a picture of me hiking with my mountain lion. Yes, I had that done. So when I jog in the hills, I always have a mountain lion with me.
When I jog in the hills.
Yes.
That's a bad idea. Dana, would you
ever jog in the hills?
Never.
No, I probably wouldn't have survived, but I'd like to know that you could.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what? This is the story of the week. I think we should have been covering. But the thing was, he didn't come forward earlier, so we couldn't see him. His name's Travis Kaufman. So I was interested all along because I think, could I have done it? And I wanted to know his weight because initially they said the lion was 80 pounds, but now they say it was 40 pounds. He's only 150. He's nowhere as big as President Trump.
I heard the lion yell, "This is mountain lion country."
This is mountain. He had a MAGA hat on, didn't he?
Yes.
Last one.
But the great thing was that he's choked him. I just think
We got
that's
one more.
wonderful.
The next one comes from the worst commuter ever. Oof.
If you say you're not disabled, you're not pregnant, I don't give a I don't want your bed bugs. I don't want your smell. You're disgusting. I don't want you sitting next to me.
Personal space, you'll have it outside.
A crowded New Jersey transit commuter train got chaotic after one woman refused to take her bag off a seat. One eyewitness saying people were irritated with her inability to act like a normal person. This would have enraged me, Juan. I would have said something. Would you have said something to her? Like, get your bag off that seat?
Yeah, but I guess I would have just moved along. I thought she was a jerk, you know.
Yeah. Pete?
Kind of the same. Like, you want to think you would do the throwdown all the way, and at some point you'd be like, not really worth it.
Yeah.
But I respect the people that stay and fight all the way. There is some principle there, people.
I could have handled her like that mountain lion.
Would you,
one look.
Would you have said something? Because it's so rude when they do that.
The thing is, like, sometimes you're just dealing with irrational people, so you just have to, like, get through it.
Yeah, she almost got thrown off, and then she left on her own.
Well, she's now doing outnumbered. No, that's considered polite in New Jersey. I'll have you know.
Yeah.
New Jersey's.
By the way, that was you, Jed. I could tell you were wearing a wig. That was you.
Don't do that.
That was you.
He's a terrible person.
Don't worry, don't
You
worry.
can't trust him on anything. Don't go anywhere. Fan Mail Friday's coming up next. This guy, man.
Oh, I love that stuff. All right, the first question from whoever. Makoma, what's the most expensive thing that you have broken? All right, Pete.
Expensive thing that I have broken. Probably a big piece of military equipment.
Yes. A plane.
That I was responsible for as the platoon leader, signed for.
Yes.
And we made up stories, maybe battlefield damage.
Oh, my goodness.
As opposed to actual damage.
How did you break it?
Battlefield damage.
There you go.
Yes, we're going to leave it right there.
You know, I was thinking, I guess my finger, you know? I broke my finger once because I got in a cab and the belt from the raincoat got caught outside, and when the cab took off, it went zoom, and I hit my finger, broke it. And that's pretty expensive.
That is a crazy injury, Jed.
I bought a beautiful piece of luggage from Italy, and I had a green smoothie explosion.
Same thing for the dress, I see.
Yes, that's exactly. You were getting that in somehow.
He is.
Said before.
Dana?
I think it would have to be, I waited tables when I was in college, and I was home for the summer, and I closed the restaurant, I got home real late, like 2 o'clock in the morning. My mom had let me borrow her Subaru, and getting into the garage, I didn't hit it, I got in an accident, basically, in the garage.
That's funny.
And I had to go tell my mom, but she was really nice about it.
Of course she is. She's a Perino. Most expensive thing I broke? Jessica Alba's heart.
Oh.
Anyway,
She never recovered.
No, her life has been downhill ever since. Oh, this is fun from Lisa S. When you're fed up, where do you go and what do you do? Juan? Do the 5.
Yeah. Gee, I never get fed up here. I would go play sports, especially if it's competitive. Like, in other words, I usually don't play basketball anymore with teenagers or college players. But if you want to get aggressive, go play with those guys.
Yeah. Jed?
I go to the gym, but first I complain endlessly to a handful of people, my 2 best friends and my mother, to the point, like, ad nauseum. I never get tired of complaining. Ever.
Dana, what do you do when you're fed up?
I always feel like you never regret taking a walk.
That's true. You never do.
So
what do you take it to?
Just go for a walk.
Oh, a walk. Okay, I thought you meant the